Hello, friends. You're at a backyard BBQ. The smell of charcoal and burgers is in the air. You're holding a cold glass of sweet tea, and you see your neighbor of 15 years walking toward you. You go to say hello, but suddenly your throat tightens. His name, it was right there a second ago, is just gone. You play it off with a, "Hey there, buddy," but inside your heart is hammering against your ribs like a trapped bird. You tell yourself it's just stress, or maybe you didn't sleep well. But friends, what if I told you that this completely normal habit is actually a hidden ticking time bomb in your body? A bomb that could strip away your independence and land you in a nursing home faster than you can imagine? I'm not trying to scare you, but I've seen this story play out too many times. Take Bill from Illinois, a retired fire chief who spent his life saving others. He was the pillar of his community, always the first to help at a church bake sale. It started with forgetting a few street names he'd known for 30 years. He laughed it off as old age until the afternoon. He was driving his grandkids to get ice cream, and he couldn't remember which way was home. The panic in those children's eyes as their grandfather stared blankly at a stop sign is a nightmare no one should ever endure. Think of your brain like a high-performance V8 engine. Over decades, if you don't change the oil, carbon deposits toxic proteins like amyloid and tau begin to coat the delicate valves of your memory. It starts as a thin film, a slight hesitation in the engine's roar. That's you forgetting a name. But soon that film turns into a thick black sludge that chokes the life out of your neurons, snapping the delicate fiber optic cables that carry your life's history. I want you to think about the financial reality here. We are talking about the average cost of a memory care facility in America, which can easily top $10,000 every single month. That is your hard-earned pension and your kids' inheritance vanishing into a corporate healthcare system while you rely on a stranger to wipe your mouth. This is the first crack in the wall before the entire structure of your life collapses. In today's video, I'm going to blow the whistle on this hidden danger. There's a lot of life-saving information today, so please stick with me until the very end. Before we dive into the dark truth, if you truly care about your health and maintaining your independence for years to come, please hit that subscribe button down below and turn on the notification bell. And if you find today's video helpful, type the words "Mind Saved Now" in the comments section below to support our community. Friends, have you ever walked into a room and completely forgotten why you were there? Or maybe you saw an old friend at the grocery store, someone you've known for a decade, and for 3 agonizing seconds their name just vanished into thin air. We tell ourselves it's just stress. We joke about senior moments. We laugh it off over a cup of coffee. But I need you to listen to me very closely right now, because what I'm about to tell you is the difference between a long, happy retirement in your own home and spending your final years staring at a beige wall in a memory care facility while your hard-earned life savings vanish into the pockets of a corporate nursing home. I am not fear-mongering. I am giving you the warning your own doctor might be too busy to explain. That tiny slip of the tongue, that forgotten name, it isn't just a glitch. It is often the first visible crack in the dam before the entire wall collapses. Let me tell you about Robert. Robert is 58 years old, living in the beautiful suburbs of Seattle, Washington. Now, Robert wasn't someone you'd think of as unhealthy. He was a high-performing software architect, a man whose entire career was built on his razor-sharp memory and his ability to juggle complex coding structures. On the weekends, you'd find him hiking the rugged trails of the Cascades or firing up the BBQ for his neighbors while they watched the Seahawks game. He was the guy everyone went to for answers. But about 6 months ago, Robert noticed something. During his morning sprint meetings, he'd go to address one of his lead developers, people he had worked with for years, and the name would just stick in his throat. He'd pause, play it off with a "Hey buddy," or "You there," and move on. He told himself he was just tired. He was drinking an extra Starbucks latte in the afternoon, blaming the Seattle gray skies and the high-pressure corporate grind. He thought he just needed a vacation. Does this sound familiar? Have you said these exact same things to your spouse? Then came the day Robert's life changed forever. He was standing in a high-stakes board presentation. The room was filled with executives, people holding the keys to his future, his stock options, and his retirement. Robert was mid-sentence, explaining a revolutionary new project when he turned to introduce the CEO. And then, nothing. The name was gone. Not just foggy, but erased. He looked at the man he'd known for 15 years and saw a stranger. Then he realized he couldn't even remember the title of the flagship project he had spent 18 months building. The room went silent. Robert could hear the hum of the air conditioner. He felt the sweat prickling on his neck. His heart began to hammer against his ribs like a trapped bird. He didn't just forget a name, friends. He lost his grip on reality. He collapsed into his chair, gasping for air, clutching his chest. His colleagues, panicking, called 911. As the sirens wailed through the streets of Seattle, Robert wasn't thinking about the project anymore. He was lying on that gurney, looking at the fluorescent lights of the ambulance, thinking about his 401k. He was thinking about the stock options that hadn't vested yet. He was terrified that if word got out that he was losing it, he'd be forced into early retirement. His income would vanish, and the money he'd saved for his kids' college and his own peace of mind would be swallowed up by medical bills and the terrifyingly high cost of assisted living. He thought he was having a stroke. He hoped it was just a stroke, because the alternative, the slow, agonizing fate of dementia, was too much to bear. In the ER, the doctors ruled out a TIA, or a mini-stroke. But when the neuropsychological tests came back and the PET scan was displayed on the monitor, the truth was even more chilling. Robert was diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. The doctor looked him in the eye and said, "Robert, your brain is starting to fail you." Now, I want to take you inside Robert's brain, and quite possibly yours, to show you what was actually happening in slow motion. I want you to visualize this because once you see it, you can never unsee it. Think of your brain as a high-performance V8 engine, the kind in those classic American muscle cars. For decades, that engine has been humming, firing on all cylinders, taking you exactly where you want to go. But imagine if every single time you drove that car, a tiny drop of sticky black tar was dripped into the fuel line. At first, you wouldn't notice. The engine is powerful, it compensates. But over years, that tar begins to harden. It turns into a crusty, rust-like sludge. In the medical world, we call this sludge amyloid beta proteins. Listen to me closely. These proteins are supposed to be cleared out while you sleep, like a cleaning crew coming into an office building at night. But for Robert, and for many of us, that cleaning crew stopped showing up. In slow motion, here's the destruction. These toxic amyloid proteins begin to misfold. They become sticky. They start to clump together in the gaps between your neurons, the very pathways where your thoughts, your memories, and your loved ones' names travel. Imagine two power lines trying to send an electrical signal to one another. Now, imagine someone throwing a thick, wet, heavy wool blanket over those lines. The spark tries to jump, but it's smothered. It can't get through. As these plaques build up, they don't just sit there. They become inflammatory. They signal your brain's immune system, cells called microglia, to attack. But the microglia get confused. Instead of just cleaning up the plaque, they start an all-out war. They release inflammatory chemicals that begin to rust the healthy brain tissue around them. This is the moment Robert sat in that board meeting. His brain was trying to retrieve the CEO's name. The signal started in his hippocampus, the library of his brain, and tried to race down the neural highway to his frontal lobe so he could speak the words. But the highway was blocked. The signal hit a wall of amyloid plaque and died. And here's the part that should make your blood run cold. While Robert was struggling to remember that name, the rust was spreading. When these plaques get heavy enough, they trigger a second protein called tau. If amyloid is the rust on the engine, tau is the fire in the wires. Tau starts inside the brain cells themselves. It causes the internal structure of the neuron to collapse like the wooden beams of a house being eaten by termites. The cell loses its shape. It can no longer transport nutrients. It literally starves to death from the inside out. And as that cell dies, it bursts, spilling more toxic tau into the surrounding area, infecting the neighboring cells. It is a chain reaction. A microscopic wildfire. By the time Robert forgot that name, he had already lost millions of these connections. The crack in the wall had been there for a decade, but now the water was rushing through. The doctor told Robert that his stress was actually the biological signature of his brain being suffocated. This wasn't just a lapse in focus, it was the physical destruction of the hardware. And friends, this is where the American nightmare becomes real. Robert sat in his living room, looking at his beautiful wife, and the fear was a physical weight in his stomach. He wasn't just afraid of forgetting, he was afraid of the cost. Do you know what the average cost of a private room in a nursing home is in America today? It can easily exceed $100,000 a year. $100,000. If Robert lived for 10 years after his diagnosis, his entire 401k, everything he worked 40 years for, would be gone. His children's inheritance? Gone. His wife's security?
Vanished.
He pictured himself sitting in a wheelchair, unable to recognize his own grandkids, while a stranger wiped his mouth with a paper towel, all while the bank foreclosed on the family home to pay for his care. That is the total collapse I'm talking about. It starts with a name. It ends with the total bankruptcy of your family's future and the loss of your very soul. But I'm telling you this today because Robert's story doesn't have to be your story. When you see that first crack, when you notice that names are slipping away or you're losing your keys 3 times a week, that is your body's emergency siren. It is telling you that the rust is accumulating, but the engine hasn't seized yet. You have to understand the medical establishment often wants to wait until the engine is dead before they offer a tow truck. They wait for dementia to be the diagnosis. But by then, the house is already ash. You need to act while it's still just a crack in the wall. We are talking about your independence. We are talking about your right to grow old with dignity, to keep your house, to know the names of your great-grandchildren, and to never ever be a burden on the people you love. Don't let the toxic sludge win. Don't let your 401k be the fuel for a nursing home's profit margin. Look at the signs. Listen to your brain. Because once that wall goes, there is no putting it back together. I'm going to show you exactly how to start cleaning that engine, how to support those cleaning crews in your brain, and how to stop the rust before it turns into a fire. But first, you have to admit that the crack is there. You have to stop saying, "I'm just tired." Listen to me closely. Your memory is your life. Without it, you're just a body in a bed. Let's make sure that never happens. Let's keep your mind, your money, and your freedom exactly where they belong, with you. Friends, I want you to listen to me very closely right now. We just talked about how your vascular system can turn against you, but there is another shadow lurking in the hallways of the aging mind, one that is perhaps even more terrifying because it steals who you are before it takes your life. Your memory is your life. Without it, you're just a body in a bed. Let's make sure that never happens. Let's keep your mind, your money, and your freedom exactly where they belong, with you. Does this sound familiar to you? You're in the kitchen, you open the junk drawer to find a screwdriver, and suddenly you're standing there staring at the Scotch tape and the old batteries, and you have no earthly idea why you opened that drawer. Or maybe you're at the grocery store. You see a neighbor you've known for 10 years, and for the life of you, you cannot remember her name. You laugh it off. You call it a senior moment. You blame it on not having enough coffee or being tired from the grandkids visiting. That is exactly what Martha thought. Martha is 67 years old, living in a beautiful, sun-drenched home in Charlotte, North Carolina. She's a retired elementary school teacher, someone who spent 40 years memorizing the names and faces of 30 new children every single September. She was the backbone of her community, an avid gardener who could tell you the scientific name of every perennial in her backyard, and a grandmother of 4 who never missed a soccer game. When Martha started forgetting things, she and her husband Jim made jokes about it. They called it menopause brain. When she forgot the name of her favorite purple hydrangea, Jim just teased her about getting rusty. But then, the stakes got higher. One afternoon, Martha was playing in the yard with her youngest grandson, little Leo. She looked down at him, this beautiful boy she had helped diaper and feed, and for a terrifying 3 seconds, she didn't know who he was. She didn't know his name. She felt a cold shiver go down her spine, but she pushed it away. She told herself she was just dehydrated from the North Carolina humidity. Friends, listen to me. That wasn't dehydration. That was the first crack in the dam. A few weeks later, Martha told Jim she was running to the CVS, just 3 miles away, the same pharmacy they had used for 30 years. She got in her SUV, backed out of the driveway, and drove. But she didn't come back in 20 minutes. An hour went by, 2 hours. Jim called her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He started pacing the living room, looking out the window, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He called the pharmacy, and they told him Martha never showed up. By the 3rd hour, Jim was on the phone with 911, his voice cracking as he tried to describe what his wife was wearing. He felt that sickening cold realization that his life was about to change forever. The police finally found her. She wasn't at the pharmacy. She was 20 miles away, sitting in her car in a gas station parking lot off the interstate. When the officer knocked on her window, Martha didn't know where she was. She didn't know how she got there. She couldn't even name the street she had lived on for 3 decades. She was found confused, clutching the steering wheel, unable to even identify her own vehicle. Now, I want you to imagine the terror of that moment. But I also want you to imagine the conversation that happened next in that hospital waiting room. The doctor sat Jim down and gave him the news. Martha had early-stage Alzheimer's. And then came the second blow, the financial reality. In Charlotte, a decent memory care facility costs an average of $6,000 a month. That is $72,000 a year, friends. Jim looked at their bank account, at the life insurance policy he had worked 40 years to build, and realized that in just a few short years, the cost of keeping Martha safe would drain every penny they had saved for their retirement. He realized he might have to sell the house she loved, the garden she planted, just to pay for a room where people would have to remind her how to use a spoon. Why did this happen? Just like we saw earlier with the heart, the brain doesn't just break overnight. This was a slow-motion disaster years in the making. I want to take you inside Martha's brain right now so you can see exactly what was happening while she was busy laughing off those senior moments. Think of your brain like a high-performance V8 engine. It is the most complex machine in the known universe. To keep that engine running, you need a perfect flow of electricity and fuel. But in Martha's case, a toxic sludge began to build up. It's a protein called beta amyloid. Under a microscope, it looks like sticky, microscopic cobwebs. In a healthy brain, your body's trash crew comes in at night while you sleep and washes those proteins away. But for Martha, that trash crew had gone on strike. The amyloid started to clump together, forming hard, calcified plaques. Imagine taking a handful of sand and throwing it into the gears of a clock. At first, the clock still ticks. Maybe it just loses a minute here or there. That was Martha forgetting the name of the flower. But as the plaques grow, they begin to physically block the communication between your brain cells, or neurons. But it gets worse. Inside the neurons themselves, another protein called tau starts to fail. Imagine the wiring inside your house. Each wire is held straight and insulated so the electricity can reach the light bulb. In Martha's brain, the tau protein, which acts like the insulation, started to collapse and twist into tangles. It's like the wiring in your car's engine fraying and melting until the sparks can't reach the spark plugs. The electricity stops. The signal dies. Now, here's the part that should make you sit up and pay attention. All of this was happening in a very specific part of Martha's brain called the hippocampus. I want you to think of the hippocampus as the librarian of your mind. Its only job is to take your daily experiences, where you parked the car, the name of your grandson, the directions to the pharmacy, and file them away into long-term storage. In Martha's brain, those amyloid plaques and tau tangles were staging an all-out assault on the librarian. They were literally suffocating the cells in the hippocampus. When the doctor looked at Martha's MRI, he didn't just see a clog,
He saw atrophy.
That's a fancy medical word for shrinking, because those cells were being choked off from their blood supply and their electrical connections. They were dying. The librarian's office was literally crumbling into dust. When Martha was driving to the pharmacy, she reached back into her memory to find the map of her neighborhood, but the map was gone. The file cabinet had been burned to the ground by these plaques. She looked at the street signs and they were just gibberish. This wasn't a glitch. This was a structural collapse of the brain's physical tissue. Listen to me closely. This process starts 10, 15, even 20 years before you get lost in a parking lot. It starts when you ignore the minor things. Every time you forget a name and say, "I'm just getting old," you might be ignoring the sound of the engine knocking before the whole thing explodes on the highway. Do you want to be the person who has to call their children to ask how to get home? Do you want to be the reason your spouse has to sell the family home to pay for a locked ward in a nursing home? I am not fear-mongering. I am telling you the cold, hard truth of the American medical system. Once you're in that $6,000 a month facility, the clock is ticking on your 401k. The government isn't going to step in and save your inheritance for your kids. They will wait until you're broke, until you have nothing left, before Medicaid kicks in. The tragedy of Martha's story is that she thought she had time. She thought the cracks in the wall were just part of the house getting older. But those cracks were a sign that the foundation was rotting. Just like a rusty pipe that finally bursts and floods your entire basement, your brain can only take so much microscopic damage before it reaches a tipping point where you can no longer function as a human being. You have to understand the mechanics. When those neurons die, they don't come back. There is no reset button. When the hippocampus shrinks, your world shrinks with it. It starts with names. Then it moves to faces. Then it moves to the ability to get dressed, to eat, to remember who you are. I don't say this to scare you. I say it to wake you up. You are the mechanic of your own body. You wouldn't ignore a thick black smoke coming out of your car's exhaust, would you? Then why on earth would you ignore the smoke coming from your own mind? We have to stop accepting senility as a natural part of the American experience. It is a disease process, a biological breakdown that is fueled by the way we live, the way we eat, and the signals we ignore. Martha is now in a facility. She spends her days looking out a window at a garden she can no longer tend. She doesn't recognize Jim when he visits with flowers. He sits there holding her hand, watching the life insurance money, the money that was supposed to go to Leo's college fund, slowly evaporate into the pockets of a corporate healthcare conglomerate. Friends, let this be your wake-up call. Your brain is a V8 engine that needs the right fuel and the right care. If you start to see the flicker in the lights, don't wait for the whole house to go dark. Let's make sure your mind stays sharp, your memories stay vivid, and your hard-earned money stays exactly where it belongs, in your family's hands. Because at the end of the day, your independence is the only thing you truly own. Let's protect it together. Stay vivid, and your hard-earned money stays exactly where it belongs, in your family's hands. Because at the end of the day, your independence is the only thing you truly own. Let's protect it together. Friends, I want you to listen to me very closely right now, because what I'm about to tell you is the difference between spending your golden years bouncing your grandkids on your knee or spending them staring blankly at a wall in a facility that smells like bleach and lost hope. Does this sound familiar? You're at the grocery store. You see a neighbor you've known for 10 years, and for the life of you, you cannot remember her name. You laugh it off. You call it a senior moment. You think, I'm just getting older. I'm telling you right now, as someone who has seen the inside of more brain scans than I can count, stop laughing. That senior moment isn't a joke. It is a warning siren. It is the first crack in the foundation of your mind before the entire house comes crashing down. Let me tell you about Jim. Jim was 62 years old, living down in Austin, Texas. Now, Jim was a man's man. He was a former high school linebacker, a guy who spent his weekends mowing his own lawn and hosting the best backyard BBQs in the county. Jim owned a small business, a legendary BBQ joint. He worked 60 hours a week, standing over those smokers, breathing in that wood smoke, and dealing with the constant stress of rising meat prices and payroll. Jim lived the American dream. He loved his red meat, he loved his football, and he loved his independence. But about 6 months ago, Jim started noticing something. He'd be talking to Bill, his meat supplier, for 15 years, and he'd just
blank.
He'd have to say, "Hey there, big guy," or "How's it going, partner?" Because Bill had simply evaporated from his mind. He started using Post-it notes. He had them stuck to the dashboard of his truck, the cash register, even the bathroom mirror. He told his wife, "I'm just busy, honey. My head is full of numbers." But it wasn't just numbers, friends. It was his life leaking out of his ears. One Tuesday afternoon, the Austin heat was pushing 100 degrees. A regular customer came in and complained about a brisket order. Jim got frustrated. He felt his face get hot. He felt that familiar thumping in his temples, that ticking time bomb feeling many of you know all too well. His blood pressure spiked. We're talking 190 over 110. A hypertensive crisis right there in the middle of the kitchen. Jim collapsed onto the prep table, gasping for air, his vision tunneling until everything went black. The 911 call was pure chaos. His employees were screaming, sirens were wailing, and when Jim woke up in the ER, the terror truly began. A young intake nurse, clipboard in hand, looked at him and asked, "Jim, who is your emergency contact? What is your wife's name?" Jim looked at her. He could see his wife's face in his mind. He could see her blue eyes and her floral dress.
But the name.
The word Sarah was gone. It was locked behind a door he couldn't open. In that moment, Jim wasn't a business owner. He wasn't a linebacker. He was a terrified child, realizing that his brain was betraying him. And then came the real American nightmare, the financial fear. As he sat in that hospital bed, all he could think about was the cost. The ICU stay, the MRI, the specialists. He knew his 401k. The money he and Sarah had saved for 30 years to travel the country in an RV was being drained in real time. He saw his family-run business, his legacy, slipping away because if he couldn't remember a name, how could he run a kitchen? He was staring down the barrel of medical bankruptcy and the very real possibility that Sarah would have to sell the house just to pay for a memory care unit that would cost $10,000 a month. Now, why did this happen to Jim? Why did a simple forgotten name turn into a total cognitive collapse? I want to take you inside the brain, in slow motion, to see the destruction that the doctors found on Jim's scans. Imagine your brain's blood vessels are like an intricate network of high-speed fiber optic cables. In a healthy brain, these vessels are flexible, clear, and pulsing with life-giving oxygen. But in Jim's brain, and listen to me, maybe in your brain too, years of high blood pressure and a diet of heavy fats had turned those vessels into a disaster zone. Think of his blood not as a smooth liquid, but as a thick, gritty sludge. Every time Jim's heart pumped, that sludge was forced through the tiny, delicate capillaries of his brain at terrifying speeds. It's like taking a power washer to a lace curtain. Step by step, that high-pressure sludge tears at the endothelium, the microscopic inner lining of your brain's plumbing. When those tears happen, your body tries to fix them by slapping on scabs made of cholesterol and calcium. This is the rust in your V8 engine, friends. Over time, the pipes get narrower and narrower. Now, here's where it gets truly scary. In the deep parts of Jim's brain, in the white matter where all the communication happens, those tiny vessels finally gave up. They didn't just clog, they leaked. This is what we call a silent microstroke. Jim didn't feel his face droop. He didn't lose the use of his arm. But deep inside, a tiny neighborhood of neurons, the ones responsible for retrieving the name Bill or Sarah, suddenly lost their oxygen supply. In slow motion, those brain cells began to gasp. Without oxygen, the batteries inside the cells, the mitochondria, stopped producing energy. The cell walls began to dissolve. The trash and toxins that your brain usually flushes out during sleep started to pile up like rotting garbage on a hot Texas sidewalk. And then, those cells died. They turned into tiny black holes on the MRI. The doctors call them white matter lesions. I call them scares of neglect. Jim's brain was becoming a Swiss cheese of lost memories. His cardiovascular neglect didn't just hurt his heart, it literally starved his mind. This is vascular dementia. It's not like Alzheimer's, which can be a slow fade. Vascular dementia is a series of cracks in the wall. One day you forget a name. The next, you can't remember how to get home from the grocery store. The next, you're unable to wipe your own mouth, and you're a stranger to the people who love you most. Doctors told Jim that the window to preserve his independence had been closing for years, long before he ever collapsed. You see, the brain is incredibly resilient. It rewires itself to compensate for these tiny strokes until it can't anymore. By the time Jim couldn't remember his wife's name in the ER, he had already lost 30% of the processing power in his frontal lobe. Does this sound familiar? Are you relying on lists? Are you struggling to find the right word in a conversation? Friends, I am not fear-mongering. I am telling you the cold, hard truth. If you wait until you can't drive, it is too late. The plumbing in your head is already rusted through. You have worked too hard to let your retirement savings be handed over to a nursing home corporation because you ignored the cracks in the wall. You have too much life left to live to become a burden on your children, forcing them to change your clothes and manage your finances while you stare out a window. Medical reality is this: your brain health is your heart health. When your blood turns to sludge and your vessels turn to stone, your mind is the first thing to go. Jim's story is a warning to every American over 55. Your independence isn't a given. It is something you have to fight for every single day. Listen to me closely. If you don't take care of the pipes, the engine will seize. And once that engine seizes, no amount of money in your 401k can buy it back. We have to stop the rust before the leaks become a flood that washes away everything you are. We're going to talk about exactly how to flush that sludge out of your system and patch those cracks. Because you deserve to keep your memories. You deserve to keep your business. And you deserve to stay in your own home. Let's make sure your story doesn't end like Jim's. Let's make sure the only thing people remember about you is the incredible life you lived, not the name you forgot. Friends, listen to me closely. You've just heard the stories of Robert, Martha, and Jim. These weren't people who were unhealthy in the way we usually think. They were high achievers, beloved grandmothers, and hard-working small business owners just like you. They were mowing their lawns in Seattle, tending to their roses in Charlotte, and serving up the best BBQ in Austin. But they all made one critical mistake. They ignored the crack in the wall. They thought forgetting a name or losing their keys was just a senior moment, a funny little quirk of getting older. But as we saw, those moments weren't quirks. They were the biological warning shots of a brain under siege. Robert was watching his 401k vanish in his mind before it vanished from his bank account. Martha was looking at her own grandson and seeing a stranger. Jim was watching his blood turn into a thick, sugary sludge that was literally suffocating his brain cells. Does this sound familiar? Have you ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there, only to feel that cold spike of fear in your chest? I'm not fear-mongering when I tell you this. That moment is your brain screaming for help. But here's the good news. I don't care if you're 55, 65, or 85. Your brain has a remarkable ability to repair itself if you give it the right tools. And the best part? These tools don't cost a dime. You don't need a $6,000 a month memory care facility if you start fixing the plumbing today. I want to give you 3 life-saving rules that you can start right now in your own kitchen to stop that crack in the wall from becoming a total collapse. You deserve to stay in your own home. Let's make sure your story doesn't end like Jim's. Let's make sure the only thing people remember about you is the incredible life you lived, not the name you forgot. The first rule is what I call the hydration flush, and it is the simplest way to stop your brain from shrinking. Listen to this. Your brain is about 75% water. Think of it like a plump, juicy grape. When you're even slightly dehydrated, which almost every American over 60 is, that grape begins to shrivel into a raisin. I want you to visualize the blood flow in your head. When you're dehydrated, your blood isn't like a clear, rushing mountain stream. It becomes thick. It becomes viscous, like cold maple syrup trying to move through a tiny glass straw. This thick blood can't squeeze into the microscopic capillaries that feed your memory centers. The cells in your hippocampus, where you store the names of your grandkids and the location of your car keys, literally begin to gasp for oxygen. They don't die instantly, they just brown out, like the lights in your house during a summer heat wave. So here's your first rule, the glass before tea rule. Before you touch a single drop of coffee or tea in the morning, which are diuretics that actually pull water out of your brain, you must drink 16 ounces of room temperature water with a tiny pinch of sea salt.
Why the salt?
Because as we age, our thirst mechanism breaks down. We don't feel thirsty even when our brain is parched. The salt contains electrolytes that act like a key, unlocking your cells so the water can actually get inside the engine instead of just passing through you. If you don't do this, you're starting your day with a rusty V8 engine, grinding metal on metal. You'll find yourself standing in the grocery store aisle, staring at a box of cereal, unable to remember if you already have some at home. That's not aging. That's a dehydrated brain. Drink the water, thin the sludge, and let your blood carry the life-giving oxygen your neurons are begging for. Now, let's talk about the second rule, and this one is vital if you want to avoid the medical bankruptcy that Jim faced. I call this the 10-minute sugar shield. Remember how Jim had those silent microstrokes? Those weren't accidents. Every time you eat a big American meal, a sandwich with white bread, a side of fries, maybe a piece of pie, your blood sugar spikes. In a young person, The body handles this. But in a brain over 55, that sugar spike is like pouring acid onto a delicate lace tablecloth. Doctors are now calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes.
Why?
Because when your blood sugar is high, your brain can't wash itself. It gets sticky. Those toxic proteins Robert had, the amyloid beta, they love a high sugar environment. They start to clump together like wet sawdust in your fuel line, eventually forming hard plaques that snap the connections between your brain cells. The rule is this: never sit down for more than 10 minutes after your largest meal of the day. I want you to get up and do what I call a circulation walk. You don't need a gym. You don't need fancy spandex. Just walk around your living room, march in place, while you watch the evening news, or step out onto the porch and walk to the end of the driveway and back. This simple movement acts like a vacuum cleaner for your bloodstream. Your large leg muscles turn on and start sucking that excess sugar out of your blood before it can reach your brain and start glazing your neurons like a donut. If you just sit in your recliner after dinner, that sugar sits in your brain, corroding your memory centers while you sleep. You are literally letting your brain rust overnight. Move for 10 minutes, and you shield your brain from the sugar glass that causes those microstoics. This leads me to the third and perhaps most important rule. This is the nightly brain rinse. Friends, did you know your brain has its own built-in dishwasher? It's called the glymphatic system. But here's the catch. This dishwasher only turns on during deep, restorative sleep. Imagine your brain cells are like workers in a busy office. All day long, they are throwing papers on the floor, leaving coffee cups on the desks, and making a mess. At night, the cleaning crew is supposed to come in with hoses and wash all that trash, the toxic proteins and metabolic waste, down the drain. But for many of us, the cleaning crew never shows up. Why? Because we are sleeping on our backs or we are looking at our blue light cell phone screens right before bed, which tells our brain it's still daytime. When the cleaning crew doesn't show up, the trash piles up, day after day, year after year. Eventually, the office is so full of garbage that the workers can't find the files they need. That's when you forget the name of the street you've lived on for 30 years, just like Martha did. To prevent this, your third rule is the left side slope. Medical studies show that sleeping on your side, specifically your left side, is the most efficient position for your brain to drain its waste. It's a matter of simple physics and gravity. When you lie on your side, the fluid in your brain can flow more freely, scrubbing those amyloid plaques away and flushing them into your lymphatic system to be filtered out by your kidneys. Listen to me, because this is the part that saves you from the nursing home. If you don't rinse your brain, you're essentially leaving your engine oil in the car for 100,000 miles. It turns into a black, gritty paste that eventually seizes the motor. I want you to put a pillow behind your back tonight to keep yourself from rolling onto your spine. Give your brain the chance to clean itself. When you wake up, you'll feel that brain fog lifting. That's not just a feeling. That's the physical result of a clean engine. I know this can feel overwhelming. I know you're worried about the cost of health care and the fear of your children having to take care of you, having to change your clothes or wipe your mouth because you've lost your dignity to this disease. But you have the power to change the ending of your story. You are not a victim of your genetics. You are the pilot of your own health. By drinking that water, taking that 10-minute walk, and sleeping to let your brain rinse itself, you're building a fortress around your independence. You are protecting your 401k from the predatory costs of long-term care. Most importantly, you're ensuring that you stay you. Don't wait for a crisis like Jim had. Don't wait for the police to find you in a gas station parking lot like Martha. Start today. The crack in the wall doesn't have to mean the house is falling down. It's just a sign that it's time to do some maintenance. You've worked too hard for your retirement to spend it in a hospital bed. Take these rules, use them, and let's keep your mind as sharp as it was the day you started your career. Your family needs you. Your grandkids need your stories. And you deserve to remember every single beautiful moment of the life you've built. Stay well, friends. All right, friends, that's all for today's topic. Before we go, let's do a quick recap of the most important life-saving takeaways. Please etch these into your memory. Number 1, recognize that forgetting familiar names isn't just a funny senior moment. It is the early biological signature of toxic proteins clogging your neural pathways like rusty pipes. Number 2, understand that waiting for obvious symptoms is a recipe for medical bankruptcy, as the window to preserve your independence closes long before you lose your ability to drive. Number 3, take immediate action by monitoring your cognitive health and vascular system today, because stopping the leak now is the only way to prevent your golden years from drowning in the fog of dementia. My friends, true health isn't an unreachable goal. It's hidden in the tiny choices we make every single day. I hope today's guide truly hits home for you. If you found this helpful, please don't be stingy. Give this video a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share this video with your family and friends. Your single share might literally save a life and keep a family whole. I'll see you in the next video.